Hello, Garland Nixon here. And once again, we get reports that Ukraine has supposedly started a counteroffensive. Is it real? Is it happening? Is it ever going to happen? Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. And let's talk about Ukraine offensive. Let's start by going to what day is this one? December 16th, 2022. We're going to go back and look at an old article, and then we're going to move forward. This article says, this is where we started. A Biden official recently told members of Congress, now this is their briefing Congress, that Ukraine has the military capability to take back Crimea. No offensive is imminent, but officials worry that a large-scale attack that threatens Russia's hold on the peninsula could push Putin to use nuclear weapons. So this is December 16th, 2022, right? The Biden administration told members of Congress, so they tell Congress that Ukraine can take back Crimea, and they're afraid. So what they're saying is this: they've got an embarrassment of riches here. We know that their military is powerful enough. We know they could take Crimea back at any given time. However, we know we could win this with ease, of course. The real fear is that we'll win it so easily that Russia will be upset and use nuclear weapons. Well, let's start here. In an abstract kind of way, they are correct in that if, in fact, a nuclear power is threatened, if in fact you say, let's just say Russia and China said, we're going to take Hawaii, and the Sixth Fleet is not going to be able to station itself in Hawaii anymore. The U.S. would likely use nuclear weapons to defend its territory. They consider it a very important military installation, and the odds are they would if the U.S. Threatens China. You know where I'm going with that. It's possible that China could use nuclear weapons to defend itself. Quite maybe one might even argue likely. And likewise, if in fact the Crimean peninsula, which Russia has had their a base there, I think they started building the base in 1781. You think they're going to give that up? Yeah, no, it's not happening, right? So in reality, that part of it is true. If you it's a generic kind of argument that says if you face a nuclear power, you risk a nuclear conflict. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. And as I've always argued, if these lunatics are insane enough to start a war with a nuclear power, the odds are overwhelming of what the outcome would be. The U.S. attacks China. Guess what? The loser will nuke the winner, who will nuke the loser. That you can guarantee. If they're surrounding Washington, D.C. with Chinese troops or Beijing, whatever the case may be, something's going to fall. Guess what? The loser is going to push the button. So they're in the ballpark of truth by saying if Crimea was threatened, Russia would use nuclear weapons. Sure. But they're, just because you're in the ballpark don't mean you're in there and you're watching a game. Don't mean you got a ticket, right? The reality is that it was propaganda always propaganda to argue that Ukraine had the potential to defend, to attack and retake Crimea. But what's important here is this, and let me bring this up again. What's important, is what they're doing. A Biden administration official recently told members of Congress. Let's look at that a little bit. They briefing to some members of Congress included discussions of the reasons Ukraine will need. Listen to this, and here's the sentence that tells you everything. The late November Ukraine briefing to some members of Congress, and it's going to be pertinent. In regards to this conversation. Some members of Congress included discussion of the reasons Ukraine will continue to need U.S. weapons and equipment for the foreseeable future. The two officials said. A Biden official, when asked during a briefing about continued support for the Ukrainian military and whether it would try to take back Crimea, responded that Ukraine now has the ability to take it back, right? So here's the bottom line, what that was. And it's something that's interesting. It was propaganda, but it was propaganda aimed at Congress. They have to get Congress to continue to okay weapons. So what do? We need more weapons. Can we win? Are you kidding me? Can we win? Can we win? We're on the verge of victory now. The Russians are running. We could take Crimea at any day, minute. All we got to do is provide more weapons. No problem. Ukraine can take Crimea. I mean, all of Russia is pretty much done. Ukraine on any given day, the Azov battalion will be celebrating and running up the flag in Red Square. So, this thing's pretty much over. Although, to maintain it, to keep it going, we're going to need you guys to continue to okay $100 million worth of weapons every single month for all eternity. If you just keep doing that, you suckers, dupes, and imperialist scumbags, then in fact, Ukraine will win. So what we saw was this, and a lot of people don't realize this, and it's important to talk about here briefly. And that is that Congress, if you look at Congress and you understand this, they're just as propagandized as the rest of the rest of us. However, there's a different element here, and this is something to think about. The members of Congress actually believe, number one, that they're getting inside information, that I'm a member of Congress and they're going to bring me the real stuff that most Americans aren't getting. So the members of Congress think that they're getting the insider information that we're not getting, and they really know what's going down. And that's one of the reasons. The other one is that they're selfish neoliberal bastards. But one of the reasons that when you see people push back against Congress and ask them questions, hey, why are we doing that? Hey, can't we stop? Why do we have to keep doing that? Stop. The Congress position is one of well, you guys are the littles. You don't have access to the information that we have. And if you understood, you poor saps, you poor ignorant schmucks, if you actually understood what we, the brilliant elite ruling class, understand, because, we've been briefed by intelligence. The CIA came and gave us stuff that you couldn't even, that your eyes would fall out and your ears would bleed if you were to see and hear, you poor low-life members of the hoi polloi. Right. So they're looking at us and they're saying you're only pushing back against members of Congress because you don't have the information that we have. You don't know what we have, and you're not getting this private inside information. So they think they're getting private inside information. Therefore, they must ignore us because if we only knew what they know, we'd surely support them. But out of ignorance, we push back. So Congress is part of Congress living in a bubble is their belief that they're getting quality, valid inside information from the intelligence communities. And in reality, all they're getting is stupid propaganda, the same that we're getting, only they don't even have to the CIA, they don't even have to make it look fluffy like they do when they put it in the newspaper. They just go straight to them. Hey, guess what? What? Our intelligence tells us Ukraine can easily take back Crimea. I mean, if they want it, we're just like, the only reason they don't is because the Russians, could get all, persnickety and fire some nuclear weapons. So, we really don't want to do that. So we'll take it back, but just maybe not right now. Maybe in a couple months we'll take it back. But right now, we're kind of laying low. We'll let the Russians hold on to Crimea for a couple more months and think they're doing something. And then Ukraine will just waltz in there and take it. In fact, I think one of the Ukrainian Nazi leaders of Azov is just going to drive right across the Kerch Bridge into Crimea and just announce, I'm the king of Crimea. And of course, all the Crimean people supporting that, since they hate Putin, will all stand up and say, we're not worthy to be in your presence, and we're happy. And please, can we now get our swastika tattoos and our official signed copy of Mein Kampf now, so we can be part of the Azov battalion? That's the kind of the way they put it. The reality is this. Now we have, we're getting here to, Let's look today. What's the propaganda look like now? Ukraine counterattack, and then what? It's always a counterattack. Don't you have to be attacked first to counterattack? It's an attack. Looks imminent as troops search for Russian weaknesses. Right. And this is the evidence. Now, look. Let me tell you something. They got some real good evidence. Do you remember when very recently when Seymour Hersh wrote this article and he says, hey man, I got a history here and my inside people have come from the intelligence community, wherever the hell, and give me this information. And he puts it out and they're like, really? An old Substack blogger? You're going to really listen to bloggers? Let me show you. Let me show you. Watch this. Watch this. S-E-Y, Seymour Hersh, Elogger. I bet I can find. I'm having a, give me a second here. There are a bunch of articles. Let me see. Bottom line is this. If you look at I'm not finding anything with Blogger, but if there were a lot of articles um, on Hersh where they went after him and just called him a blogger, right? That that we shouldn't listen to him. He's not a valid voice. He doesn't know what he's talking about, right? So we've got to ignore Seymour Hersh. Now, look at this article. Watch this one. Let's see where they get their information from. It says, Russian military bloggers suggest that Ukraine has made gains. Now, when a celebrated international journalist of fame, of great history and knowledge, right, who's broken major stories, breaks a story that goes against the U.S. empire, they say Seymour Hersh is just an idiot old blogger on Substack that we shouldn't listen to. But today they say, hey, they've got information, man. They got big information on The Guardian. And where they get it from? Russian military bloggers suggested. They suggested it. Hey, maybe, who knows? But it's possible something might have happened. And we got Russian military bloggers to tell us. Ukraine may not have formally declared its counteroffensive has become, but the attacks being reported on Russian lines overnight and into Monday morning look like the first steps of what is likely to be a tough military campaign. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound like an offensive. Kiev is, of course, mindful of the need for surprise. Oh, they ain't done real well so far. They've been telling us for months, hey, guess what, guys? We're going to do a counteroffensive anytime now. But they're mindful of the critical importance of surprise. What you want to do to maintain surprise, to maintain the element of surprise, you start by going for at least 6 to 8 months saying, we're going to do this. And you tell them specifically when. In the spring, we're going to attack you. That's how you maintain the element of surprise. Releasing a video on Sunday of its soldiers holding fingers to their lips. Okay, we've been telling you for 6 months. 6 months we've been telling you. Make sure. Anybody out there? Think anybody listening? All right, here's the video. We've been telling you for 6 months what we're going to do. We've been telling you when we're going to do it and pretty specifically where we're going to do it. Shh, we don't want the Russians to hear. But to show that we are maintaining the utmost secrecy and the element of surprise, we're going to release a video with people doing this. Now, granted, we've told you for month after month, article after article, printed, demanded it, had meetings on it everywhere, told you what we were doing, how we were going to do it, told you where we were getting war material from, how many soldiers we were training, how many barricades. We've given you all of the information you could possibly need to know what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. However, our plan to put all that behind us and maintain the element of surprise is to get a bunch of friggin' idiots on a video going like this. Shh, we've got our fingers in front of our lips. The Russians will never figure out what we're doing. See, all you have to do to maintain the element of surprise is release a video with a bunch of people with their fingers in front of their lips. And it says so right here, right? Mindful of the need for surprise. Hey guys, I know we've told everybody what we're going to do, but we've got to surprise people. What do you suggest that we do now that we've told them everything? I got a plan. This is going to be a good one too. Okay. All righty. We get a bunch of soldiers and we film them with their fingers right in front of their lips. That's pretty much the universal indicator. Be quiet. We don't want to hush, shush. We don't want people to know what we're doing, right? We do that. And all of the information and data that we've been giving the Russians for months about what we're going to do will immediately dissipate. And the Russians will be watching it and they'll say, yes, sir, these bastards are attacking. Oh, about 8:45 p.m. tomorrow morning. They've got 27 brigades and they've got, let's look, we got a list of all of the stuff that they're going to use, the types of equipment, how we can thwart it, the areas that they're coming. They don't have air cover. We've attacked. Okay, we're all good to go. And then the Russians will suddenly turn on let's see, hey, there's a new Ukrainian video on Telegram. Let's check it out. Hey, wait a minute. There's 7 soldiers and they got their fingers in front of their lip. Throw all that crap away, man. The soldiers got their fingers in front of their lips. I mean, come on. That just means that all of the intricate and detailed information and plans that we have for what they're going to do, all the intercepted conversations that we've had, all of the email, everything that we've got that tells us exactly when and what they're planning on doing, throw that crap away because, hey, they just put a bunch of guys on a video with their fingers in front of their lips. They're mindful of the of maintaining the element of surprise. Brilliant stuff. And now you understand why there's no chance that the neocons can win. There we go. But the volume of reports from the Russian side tells its own story, with Moscow's Ministry of Defense reporting a 2-brigade assault on the Donetsk end of the southern front. Ooh, 2 whole brigades. Well, this thing's over. The Kremlin was quick to declare the attack repulsed, but several in Russia's community of ultra-nationalist military bloggers were more skeptical. Relying on their own sources, they suggested Ukraine had made some initial gains. Well, there you go. We got some ultra-nationalists, which, let's face it, when it comes to Ukraine, sounds like Nazis. And so, hey, the Russian Nazis, they got some Nazis over there that are aligned with the Ukrainian Nazis. So the Nazis are all getting together, and let's face it, we work with the Nazis. So we're looking at what they got to say. Who do you want to believe? Believe the ultra-nationalists. Those are the guys that, hey, they're not. Would they lie? The Kremlin was quick to declare the attack repulsed, but several. Okay, so here's what they're saying. No, are you kidding me? 2 brigades went up against the mighty Russian army, took them out, and just took them out. 2 brigades of people. How many brigades did the Russian have? About 70, 80 brigades. But that's not important now. What's important is that the ultra-nationalists are suggesting some sort of success. Igor Girkin, perhaps the best known by who, said the Russian MOD statements were not quite true, that the enemy had managed to cut into our position, and argued that it looked likely the counteroffensive had finally begun. Had managed to cut into our position. That don't sound real definitive. Hey, how's things going, man? I think we've managed to cut into their position. Did you take any territory? Nah. Prisoners? Mm-mm. Surround some Russian brigades? Not really. What'd you do? Managed to cut into their position. What does that mean? I don't really know, but we lost 400 guys. So what the hell else am I going to say? If the Russian Ministry of Defense is correct and Ukraine is attacked with 2 brigades, that amounts to a force of several thousand troops. Neither of the attacking units named by the ministry are listed as among the 12 Western equipped. Okay. So the bottom line is this. There's also evidence, where is it, of Ukraine undertaking attacks elsewhere on the 1,000-kilometer front. It is possible, too, that Ukraine does not even know where it wants to place its key counterattack forces until a point of weakness is found. It's possible. Who knows? Probably not, but possible. Hey, we've got people that are suggesting things. We've got things that are possible. Yes, sir, buddy. We got some real concrete information in this one from the Guardian. We got things that are possible. We got information from military bloggers. We got suggestions. It don't sound like much to me. And they go on to say that, hey, this counteroffensive might have already begun. We're not even sure. But if it did, there's suggestions that possibly there was victory. It's a pile of crap. It's what they know. I suspect the only offensive that you'll see will be right here in the Guardian. It looks to me, and look, they even got pictures of smoke, right? Ukrainian forces attacking Russian positions near Klitschivka, Donetsk Oblast, right? So there you go. We got smoke and things like that. We got suggestions from military bloggers. Man, we are rolling here. And they end by saying, I always like to read the last paragraph. It is obvious how much is at stake for Ukraine politically and emotionally, but in Kiev, the anxiety runs deeper than that. I know that when the counteroffensive starts, a lot of people I know will die, a politician told The Guardian on Sunday. However necessary Ukraine believes this moment is, so much ahead is uncertain, right? So what do we have? We have months of, hey, we are trying to start the offensive. We may start an offensive. We could possibly get an offensive going. Months and months of that. We get, okay, the offensive is going to start within the next month, within the next week. So this goes on and on. Then all of a sudden, the Russians step in and they start hitting, I mean, and let's face it, how obvious is this? They wake up and they say, look, it appears that the Ukrainians are about to start an offensive. So here's the game plan. We will hit their supply lines. We'll hit their troop concentrations. We'll hit their methods of moving men and material, train stations, warehouses, all of that, right? So the Russians did what anybody would do. If you say that you are mustering your troops together and gathering weapons to attack me, I want to hit the troops and I want to stop the weapons and I want to prevent the attack. I want to intercept your ability to attack me, right? So sorry about that. It's obvious. Sorry about that. No, and wouldn't you know, even the call I get says potential spam. I wonder if it was a Russian military blogger calling me to give me some information. At any rate, we move forward. So the Russians hit a lot of stuff to cripple the ability to inhibit the ability of the Ukrainian military, of the NATO military, to attack them, to launch this offensive. Apparently, there was very, very significant damage done to the Ukrainian storage of weapons. Apparently, even troop concentrations who were planning to go in were consistently and constantly hit with drones and missiles and things of that nature. So even the ones that were behind. So the Russians apparently said, hey, man, if you're going to tell me what you're going to do, we're going to do everything we can to prevent you having you may be able to do it, but you won't have a lot of strength to it. So what we're seeing now is what we were told was there was going to be some gigantic offensive that was going to take back Crimea. Now it appears to be a pinprick. Now it appears to be, let's face it, a political move. If they make it really, and see, this is what I kind of thought would happen for a while. Here's the bottom line. If they do a major offensive and that major offensive gets crushed, right? They set themselves up for a counterattack if the Russians want to do it. If the Russians crush this offensive, if they do a big offensive, they take heavy losses, all this equipment, everything is gone. That does, one of the things that it does is it sets the Russians up for a counteroffensive if they choose, when the Ukrainian soldiers are kind of on the downside of an offensive. They're trying to get back, they're trying to regroup, and the Russians can do a counterattack. The other thing that it does is it sets up a diplomatic counterattack from the forces inside and outside of the US empire that want to end this thing. So those in Europe who want to end this thing, we're probably looking at this thing saying, hey man, great, we let this happen. We let them lose and get beaten real bad. And then we can start screaming like, we got to end it, man. This is terrible. All of these people are killed. And we got to find a way out now. So it would give the Russians a potential window for a devastating counterattack. And additionally, it would create a window for those who look to in this thing diplomatically and look to put pressure on the neocons in DC to do it. And it would be problematic for the neocons because it would be hard to resist that pressure. There'd be a fight, there'd be a battle inside the empire, and they would be hard pressed to win that. So what I think we're seeing is this: something that they can call an offensive, right? So they launched some attacks, 2 brigades here, 2 brigades there, right? They launched some attacks with a couple, and you notice they said, yes, there's 2 brigades, there's several thousand men. That sounds to the novice, to the layperson, as a large attack. Oh, there's thousands of people. But when you understand that there's several hundreds of thousands on the other side, you realize that it is like an expeditionary attack. It's almost like, in comparison to the size of the Russian contingent that is on the other side of the contact line, it's like when the military does recon by fire, right? They'll send out some troops, they'll send out some platoons to draw fire to see where your troops are, to see where you're firing from, so they can so they can attack those, right? It's kind of like that. It's kind of like sending out a small contingent for some, shall we say, a greater strategic purpose than simply the engagement, the military engagement of that particular small group. So it may be a platoon going out to draw fire and see where you guys are. But in this instance, I think it is a couple of brigades going out here and there to engage the Russians, probably as lightly as they can, to do an engagement. They know they're going to take some pain and get the hell out of there. That way, they can write in the Guardian and the New York Times and the Washington Post, man, our offensive is going great, and they can keep this going for a while. Send a brigade here, or a brigade there, a few thousand guys here, a few thousand guys there. Engage, get out, and they can keep this going for a while and say, yes, sirree, the big offensive has started and it's going on. And the Russians will be sitting at the other side just waiting, because, the Russians are laying low. They're waiting for this big offensive of 30, 40, 50,000 men, and they are ready to go at it, right? They're ready to, I'm sure they've got, a lot of things ready for this. Of course, they would be prepared for this. It only makes military sense. But the DC neocons no longer have the military wherewithal in Ukraine to launch such an offensive. I believe part of it is when we've heard the last several weeks, at least 3 weeks, the Russians have been nonstop, night after night, drone attack, missile attack, bombing at the runs, you name it, right? I think it is no coincidence that this stuff ramped up at exactly the same time that the Ukrainians had indicated that they would be launching their offensive. So what we have now is a Ukrainian military that has been crippled. The things that they put together for this offensive has been crippled. And now all they have left is a narrative of a counter-offensive. So the counteroffensive will actually be launched in the Guardian, in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, on MSNBC. So they can come on and say the offensive is going on and they are taking territory. They'll make up the name of a town, right? Yeah, they've taken up they've taken the territory in the oblast of right? You'll be like, what? I didn't catch that. Yes, it was the oblast of. They took kilometers and a whole lot of troops. You'll be like, you're mumbling here. What are you doing? What are you doing? And they'll just keep, mumbling, making up the name of something, making up crap, and saying, yes, the offensive is going on. And they'll give you numbers that sound big. 3,000 troops attacked in the area of Liman or something like that, right? And you'll be like, wow, 3,000, that's a lot. It ain't in the context of this war. So I think what we're looking at is, they've been saying the offensive is ready to go any day. The bottom line is this, from the Zen thing that I always do. And that is, when I use a word, what does that word mean? Words are nothing but symbols. They're sounds that refer to something. When I use a term, whatever it is, the old, what's the definition of a woman? That's the big thing they ask politicians now, right? But again, all they're really saying is, when you make that sound, woman is nothing but a sound. What are you referring to? In this instance, when you use the term offensive, what are you referring to? They built up an expectation. They built up a definition. And see, if you think of it, it's kind of slick neocon talk, right? They built up a definition of what the term offensive meant. We're going to launch offensive. What does that mean? That means hundreds of thousands of soldiers. That means this massive attack, jailbreak attack on the Russians. All these people were coming in hot and heavy against the Russians. And we got all of this equipment, and we got tanks, and we got F-16, 18, you name it. We got everything. And boom, we're going to hit the Russians. So they created a definition in your mind of an offensive being the clash of two titans, two gigantic armies going at it. The Ukrainians are going to be coming downhill on the Russians, and they're going to let them have it. That was the definition we were given. Now that they don't have the capability to do said downhill big arrow offensive, now they created a definition, but what they're going to do is something different than the definition they created, in a way that kind of from a rhetorical perspective works, because you now have in your mind's eye a view of what an offensive is. And now when they say they're doing the offensive, in your mind's eye, it's the clash of titans. On the ground, they send a few brigades here, they send effectively pinpricks here, pinpricks there. They take massive casualties. I saw where one attack, apparently there was 300 casualties, but the bottom line was this: it ain't 3,000, it ain't 30,000. If they launch the big one, they can't hide that many casualties. This way they can say, they lost 300 guys. That ain't bad. Well, if you're one of the 300, it is. And if you look at the percentage, if they sent 3,000 and they lost 300, you lost 10% of your people, right? So I think that's the game here. I think the game here is now that they have a definition, they'll say we did the offensive. You'll be expecting and think this big clash of the titans. And then when it's the over, as it were, and all that means is they write a new article and say, well, it's over. And then they'll say, okay, we had an offensive. Did you take any ground? Well, they can always make up the name of some towns and say they took it. But I think what they're more likely to do is say the Russians said there were going to be massive offensives. I mean, massive, unthinkable casualties. The Ukrainians engaged them. They fought them to a standstill. They'll go in and they'll get nothing. They will achieve nothing. They'll get their asses handed to them, place after place. They'll run for the hills. Which I'm not blaming the Ukrainians. I'm not saying the Ukrainians aren't fighters or whatever. I'm not saying their military is not competent. I'm just saying they're up against a superior opponent. Bottom line. And then they go back, and then, as they've said, right, think of this game. We are fighting to a stand. We fought, there was the offensive, and it was a standstill. They then say, well, we didn't win or lose. The Russians didn't win or lose. You know, Ukraine has been a standstill for a long time, and it's going to continue to be a standstill. Therefore, you must provide lots of weapons so that we can maintain this thing as a standstill. You must provide more weapons. We must continue weapons. And then this offensive, don't get me wrong, it was devastating on the Russians. Oh my God, the Russians lost 10,000, million, 100 million, thousand troops. They're pretty much out of missiles now. They got no shells left, and they're fighting with shovels. They don't even have guns anymore. They're running out of washing machines. They're getting chips from the washing machines for their missiles. They're running out of washing machines. They got to hand wash their clothes and hang them out on the line. I'm telling you, it's hell for the Russians. I don't know how they somehow crawled out of this offensive, but for some reason, we didn't wipe every Russian out. I think there's a few left after all this great successful offensive we have, which only tells us we need a fall offensive in September. September is the one that's going to take them out. So here's the plan. Here's part two, offensive part two. You guys all have to double down on weapons. You got to give us even more weapons. You got to give us even more money. You got to give us even more shells, because this was the warm-up offensive. This was the little one. We threw a few elbows. We just wanted to feel the Russians out a little bit. We didn't really want to take Crimea back until we're sure what we're going to do. But right now, the game plan is we need more weapons, more money, more this, more that, more everything for the spring of it, for the fall offensive. And then, of course, most likely we'll have to have another spring offensive. How you gonna have a fall offensive with no spring offensive? What kind of a jerk do you think we are? So, I mean, that's, I think, what we're looking at. We're looking at a narrative-driven offensive where they do what they can with what they got. They got a grenade here. If you got a rock, you throw a rock. If you got a slingshot, you make it go a little faster than a slingshot. Their hopes for a massive offensive have been hopelessly dashed. And now the game plan is, how can we have stories in the newspaper that make it appear that we had an offensive? And then we can go brief Congress and say there was an offensive and the Russians lost 1 million men. And somehow they're putting the old, they're putting the crippled, they're putting the mentally ill, anybody they can get, they're throwing to the front lines because they were beaten down so badly and the losses were so unthinkable. That's what you're looking at, a bunch of crap, basically. And lies. At any rate, well, I got to go. That's a short one. Let's see. That wasn't that short. We're on for 35 minutes. Thanks a lot, everybody. I wish I had, well, let me see. Do I have time? Let me look. I got a couple super chats, so I'll see if there are any questions. Sparky, the Sparkster, says older government people think they get the alternative perspective from their Facebook news feed in the course of looking at pictures of their great grandchildren. There are many 70 plus in the House and Senate. 70 plus. Yeah, those are the young whippersnappers of 70. And this, let's see. Shh, don't tell the Ukrainians they've lost. That's right. We got a video with people with their fingers on their lips. So we know things are going well for the Ukrainians. Ukrainians cannot do any true offensive and defend against a Russian offensive in another area at the same time. They cannot commit their reserves. This is a PR stunt. Mehdi, you are 100% on the money. Lots of smart people here. MLZ says, the woke mentality has arrived to the conflict and result. The Ukrainians identify as the winners and have taken Russia mentally. There you go. That's what they're going to do. They're going to all identify as winners. That's the plan. All right, let me just look at Rockfin real quick. And how about thanks a lot, Ted Sawyer. Animate it and put it on The Simpsons to perfectly be in context, to be perfectly in context. Yes. All right, I think that's it. And thank you, a super sticker from Macarius 39. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. I got to get ready to head for the hill.